Hello everyone, wishing you a peaceful and happy day. The morning seems calm, but inside that house, there is a man slowly losing his faith in life. James sits quietly by the window, his eyes empty and distant. The call from the police has just extinguished the last flicker of hope about Diep. What he doesn't know is that somewhere else, an invisible thread is beginning to tie their fates together once more. Please stay and watch, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Your support will help us reach 1,000 followers and bring you even more heartfelt stories to come. Morning draped the house in a thin veil of sunlight, soft and fragile, like silk resting across the window frame. Everything was so quiet that one could hear only the ticking of the clock, the whisper of the wind through the trees, and the faint sigh of the man sitting on the chair. James sat still, his eyes fixed on the window. On the table, his phone screen was still lit, the words Officer Tan fading away. He lowered his head, shoulders drooping. The message was the same as always. No new leads on Miss Diep. The room seemed to shrink around him. The whistle of a boiling kettle from the kitchen became the only sound left in the heavy air. James ran a hand through his hair, eyes weighed down with fatigue. His face was gaunt after so many sleepless nights. He leaned back on the sofa, closed his eyes. But Diep's image, her gentle smile, her soft voice, flickered once more in his mind. The door creaked open. His mother stepped out, her face etched with worry though she tried to appear calm. "You called the police again?" she asked softly. James nodded, trying to hide his exhaustion. "Yes, Mom. They're still looking. But there's nothing new." Silence lingered. James lowered his head, his hands clasped tightly over his knees. He couldn't look at his mother, afraid to see in her eyes the reflection of his own helplessness. The room was bathed in a cool blue light from the window. In the corner, a pot of red roses stood in bloom, their petals deep and still, like quiet drops of blood in the morning calm. The door to his mother's room closed gently. The light inside dimmed, filtering weakly through the pale curtain. She sank onto the edge of the bed, hands pressed to her chest, her breath uneven. Tears rolled down her crimson blouse, tears that had waited all night, needing only the slightest touch to bust free. All the fear, all the pain she had been holding back finally escaped in trembling sobs. Outside, James listened. That sound, the sound of his mother's heartbreak, pierced through the wooden door and struck straight into his chest. He opened the door, stepped inside, and sat beside her. No words were spoken, only the quiet gesture of his arm wrapping gently around her shoulders. Mother and son sat there, leaning against each other in the small room, an embrace just strong enough to keep a bit of warmth alive amid the storm. No promises were made, only the tightening of hands, speaking what words could not. A while later, James walked out, adjusting his collar, his eyes more resolute. He left for work. Behind him, his mother sat quietly at the table and made a secret phone call. Her voice trembled. "I need someone to find a girl named Diep." It was a morning like any other, and yet it felt as though all the peace in that house was about to shatter. After the forest rain, a thin mist blanketed the earth and sky. The road leading to the lumber mill was winding and muddy, the slow roll of the tires through each turn, carrying an air of emptiness. James stopped at the company gate and stood still for a long moment. The mountain wind swept past, bringing with it the raw scent of fresh-cut wood and the damp breath of the earth. Inside the workshop, stacks of timber stood piled high, raindrops still dripping softly onto the concrete floor. Trang sat at an old desk, focused on checking the ledgers. Hearing the familiar footsteps, she looked up and offered a faint smile. A smile that was both greeting and concern. "Are you feeling any better?" James nodded, placing a stack of files on the table, his voice calm but weary. "I'm fine. It's just, there's still no news about Diep." His voice was hoarse, tired, as if something inside him had quietly broken. They both fell silent. The old iron fan turned slowly above, its hum blending with the soft rustle of wind through the red tarp outside. A sound that felt almost like a sigh. James flipped open a folder and discussed a few unfinished matters. He handed Trang a few remaining contracts, reminding her to keep track of the progress. Then, after a pause, he added softly, "If anything urgent comes up, call me. I'll be on the move a lot these days." Trang looked at him, her eyes dimming slightly. She understood. On the move a lot meant still searching for Diep. Suppressing a sigh, she simply replied, "I understand. Go ahead. I'll take care of things here." James said nothing more. A flicker of warmth crossed his eyes, faint, tinged with sorrow. Outside, clouds were gathering again over the distant mountains. The scene blurred into a haze, as if a thin mist had settled over all the unspoken emotions between them. He stepped out of the workshop, pausing for a moment before getting on his bike. The rain had stopped, but moisture still clung to the leaves, glistening like drops of memory. James lifted his gaze toward the horizon, where the fog was slowly lifting. He knew his search was far from over, and somewhere out there, perhaps Diep was still waiting for him, amid the vast sea of humanity. The door closed. The outside world shut away, leaving only him, the sound of rain, and the weight of his own breathing. The drizzle fell steadily, each drop sliding down the glass before shattering into countless tiny beads. James rested his head against the steering wheel, his fingers still clutching his glasses. A single tear slipped down, merging with the raindrops outside. No one could tell where the sky ended and where the sorrow of a lonely man began. Faint light filtered through the fogged-up windshield, casting trembling patterns of shadow and glow across his face. In that flicker of silence, memories returned. Diep's smile beneath the eaves, her clear voice on quiet afternoons, the peaceful days that once felt like a dream. Now they existed only in memory, so fragile he was afraid they might shatter if he dared to touch them. He closed his eyes and exhaled softly, his voice barely a whisper, a promise to himself. Even the smallest hope, I'll still keep searching. Outside, the rain grew heavier, pounding against the windshield like 1,000 restless heartbeats. And yet, within that storm of sound, a faint warmth stirred, a fragile but unwavering note of faith. James opened his eyes. In that sorrowful gaze, something had changed. No longer despair, but resolve. quiet, steady, unyielding. He slid his glasses back on and started the engine. The roar of the motor rose up, mingling with the rhythm of the rain, like a symphony of persistence and pain, rising toward the uncertain road ahead. In another corner of the countryside, James's mother quietly stepped into a small cafe at the end of a narrow alley. She looked out of place, amid the haze of cigarette smoke and the clattering sound of an old ceiling fan. Across from her sat a tattooed man, his eyes cold, his voice rough and raspy. "If you want someone found, the price is at least 20 million. Her hands trembled slightly as she gripped her small purse, her voice breaking. "I just need my son to have peace of mind. Please, find that girl for me." The man nodded, a flicker of calculation glinting in his eyes. The cafe door closed behind them, leaving only the sound of rain and the bitter scent of coffee, and the quiet fear creeping into every breath of a mother who had just made a desperate choice. The afternoon rain still fell softly as James decided to post flyers in search of Diep. Amid the gray curtain of drizzle, he carefully pressed a sheet of paper with her photo against a tree trunk, his hands trembling slightly from the cold and from the emptiness swelling inside him. Raindrops slid down the image, like the tears he refused to let fall. Each gentle stroke to smooth the paper against the bark tightened something in his chest. Diep's smiling face beneath a cluster of red blossoms seemed to come alive again, radiant, tender, and heartbreakingly distant. He stood still for a moment, then moved on, pasting another flyer onto a power pole by the roadside. The rural path was muddy, his tires thick with dirt, rain lashing against his shoulders, but he didn't stop. There was only one thing left driving him. He had to find Diep. As the rain began to ease, James returned to the old farmhouse. The wooden gate creaked faintly, familiar yet strange. The gourd trellis that once cast a cool shade now hung dry and brittle, its vines drooping like faded strands of memory. He walked slowly, his eyes tracing every corner. The spot where Diep used to hang her laundry. The bamboo chair where she would sit peeling pomelos. The wooden table still bearing old scratches from days gone by. The silence was suffocating. A sparrow fluttered onto the porch, chirped a few soft notes, then flew away, leaving behind a vast emptiness. James sat on the doorstep, head bowed. The rain had just stopped, and the scent of damp earth rose faintly in the air. He took a deep breath, as if trying to pull back every ounce of strength into his chest. The distant sky was clearing, a pale sunlight breaking through the wet leaves, its glow reflected in his eyes. Warm, steady, determined. James pulled out his phone and spoke into it, voice hoarse but firm. "Tuan, print more missing person flyers. Post them everywhere, at the workshops, the markets, the dorms. We have to keep searching." Though his tone was rough, it carried a new kind of strength. A flame reignited inside him. Outside, the rain had fully stopped. Drops clung to the leaves, sparkling like crystal. Somewhere in the garden, birds began to sing, and a soft breeze rustled through the dry gourd vines, sending a few remaining drops pattering onto the tin roof. A rhythm, like a heart learning to beat again. James lifted his face to the sky, letting the light touch his rain-soaked skin. He knew the road ahead was still long. Amid the rain of memories,